Welcome to the ultimate frustration and beauty of using $150 phone and why I'm never switching back to my previous iPhone. And for reasons that are really not simple to explain, so bear with me, because we will need to look deeper into human addiction to those gadgets. We will also need to analyze sexual attraction and what green and blue bubbles have to do with that. But we will also need to ask brilliant minds of today why they're not even using cell phones. In the summer of 2019, exactly 1 year ago, I left my trusty iPhone 8, the last version with a fingerprint sensor and the one that already ditched the headphone jack, and I ordered the cheapest phone that I can find from relatively unknown brand that actually had a lot of positive reviews. To be honest, retail price was penny less than $200, but I was able to score a massive discount and voila! I had a good reason. In that time I was working on my most ambitious documentary, embarking on a long journey to Cuba where I will spend months investigating and shooting. Since there is no internet in Cuba, I needed to rely on SD cards for some guerrilla phone shots. And the rest is history. After a challenging and frustrating journey, I'm never going back. Hi there, my name is Vladislav Radak. I'm writer and mathematician. Let me take you on a weird technological adventure.
Hello, Instagram.
Bad boy. Run wild. I'm on a mission and I won't stop. No destination, but it's worth a shot. You gotta let it go.
If you ever misplace your phone, you might have experienced a light or even severe state of panic until it's been found. About 73% of the people claim to experience this unique flavor of anxiety, which makes sense when you consider that adults in US spend on average 2 to 4 hours per day tapping, typing and swiping on their devices. That adds up to 2,600 daily touches. Most of us have become so intimately entwined with our digital lives that we sometimes feel our phones vibrating in our pockets when they're not even there. Our addiction to dopamine released once we get notifications is well documented in science, and also the negative impact of overusing those devices on our mental health and our awareness is on a rise, yet we are expected to update our cell phones every year or two because we need fresher, smoother, faster and more brighter experience just to feed our addiction. How does that even make sense? Living without the smartphone is not an option, and that is proven through many social experiments. From navigating the streets and booking a train ticket to communication with the rest of real friends and paying bills, life without a smartphone actually looks much more punishing than a life with one. Are we becoming slaves of some infinite system that we created and from which there is no going out? But what if all the advantages of the premium smartphones like iPhone and Samsung is what makes them more addicting and less a productive tools and life shortcuts? So enter the frustration and the beauty of using $150 phone. There is a really big hardware and software difference between those two, and I'm not going to really go into detail about those. You can watch any other YouTube channel. This one has a little bit more things, even that is like almost 10 times cheaper than this one. It has a headphone jack that I really use a lot. There's like a USB Type-C. There are 2 SIM cards that are great for international traveling. There's also SD card, which I really use a lot as a guerrilla filmmaker. And but it has much worse screen. iPhone has a much better screen, much smoother experience, but my real question is experience of what exactly? Analyzing my time spent on the phone, I came to the conclusion that on average I spend more than 2 hours a day staring at the screen, being distracted by notifications of the apps that don't really add to the quality of my life. Almost all that time was consuming senseless content that prompted me to feel like I'm missing more, like I don't own enough stuff, and bringing even more anxiety. Then I went to Cuba. You see, almost all the apps that we use need internet to work. and there is no internet in Cuba. I felt lost and nervous during the first couple of days, believing that my family will think I'm probably dead, that my boss will fire me for not answering my emails, that by having this connection will make me influence somehow things in my life. And now, since I cannot text or tweet or post anything, I cannot hop on the online opportunities. My life is out of my control. None of this happened. I was shocked upon my return that I had a couple dozen senseless messages, unimportant email, and Prince sadly died, but my biggest shock was that world kept turning around even without me on my phone. How come? Soon all social media apps were gone off my phone. I turned almost all notifications off, and that is much easier to control on Android, except for closest couple of friends and family. Was I falling in love with the idea of having a bad phone? It's hard to speak about premium versus budget smartphone without having a camera conversation. And in a society where our self-worth is usually enhanced by the way we see ourselves through the lens of our camera, pixels really matter. We are ready to spend additional cash for a better cell phone upgrade. That usually means a little bit better camera, a couple more lenses, slightly better hardware, and maybe a little bit better software. But the real question is, are my personal photos are much better with an iPhone that has arguably much better camera than photos taken by this budget cell phone? I challenged myself to do good photos with my inexpensive replacement phone. A cheap phone with somewhat average software and a Gcam, that is app that copies the best software tricks of Google developed Pixel phone, taught me something new about my everyday photography endeavors. Don't take photo of a great moment with terrible conditions. Take photos of not so special moments with absolutely mesmerizing conditions. Be patient. Be humble. Compose your shot. Soon, I stopped even taking my phone out on the concerts, parties, and anywhere where chance of missing a real-life thing will be higher with tinkering around the settings in my camera app. After the painful switch to the less capable phone, I started comparing the activity time with my previous one. I expected it to be less, but not so drastically. My statistics showed that I used my cheap phone almost 1 hour less than iPhone weeks prior. That adds up to 7 hours over the course of just 1 week that I can spend on more sports, meditation, reading books, or writing nonsense like this and sharing it with you. That shouldn't come as a surprise, since Apple is the only company making both software and hardware in-house, making the experience much smoother and thus much more addicting. In speaking about the software design, we cannot skip mentioning the infamous blue and green bubbles. If you're an avid texter, this might sound familiar to you. If you're using Apple products, your friends with an iPhone will appear in your inbox in the form of blue bubble, while Android users will scream in unpleasant green. Postmodern snobbery took it one step further, so some people are excluded from group chats, as Fast Company reported in 2019 when analyst Ben Bajarin recently talked to a teenage boy at his daughter's school who has defected from an Android to iPhone because of iMessage lock-in. The boy said he was tired of being shut out of iMessage group chats because messages from his Android phone were showing up as green bubbles, and his iPhone using pals, whose messages appeared in blue bubbles, didn't like it. This is the part where choice of our technology really divides us in unexpected ways. A new survey has found out that 70% of singles would prefer to date someone who owns an iPhone instead of Android user, with nearly 2 in 5 stating that they believe the phone an individual uses can affect their impressions on a first date. According to the recent findings, only 65% of the iPhone users will be willing and open to go on a date with somebody who owns an Android smartphone. What? Really? In a society where our level of attraction is deeply correlated with the cost of the products that we are enslaved by, I decide to ride on my own terms. And when it comes to the smartphone, that I see rather as a shackle than a device of inspiration, I'm opting for a cheap shackle. A cheap phone will set me free while traveling and not worrying about being stolen, making me part of the community and signaling that if a person wants to find out something more about me, we actually need to start talking and not just texting. And I'm not the only one. Many influential people from Tom Cruise to Elton John would rather jump out of the planes or just play piano than own a cell phone. But one person who is big inspiration for me has been even more vocal about not using technology at all. Christopher Nolan, the brilliant director and writer of the world's greatest sci-fi movies, doesn't even have a smartphone or uses email. Well, I never used email because I don't find it would help me with anything that I'm doing. I just couldn't be bothered about it. As far as the cell phone goes, it's like the whole thing about in New York City, you're never 2 feet more away from the rat. So I'm never more than 2 feet from the cell phone. I mean, we'll be on a scout with the 10 people and all of them have the phone, so it's very easy to get in touch with me when people need to. When I started this business, not so many people had cell phones. I didn't have one. I never bothered to get one, and I'll be very fortunate to be working continuously, so there's always someone around me who can tap me on the shoulder and hand me the phone if they need to. I actually like not having one because it gives me freedom to think. My dependence on what might be the nicotine of 21st century is lesser and lesser. I still use maps and occasionally text friends, but only to agree where we're going to meet. I don't feel obligated on spending thousands of dollars on a device that is slowly deteriorating my life and influences my mental health. I will still rock $150 phone, and for the rest of the money, well, I will invest it in the Apple stock. I would rather be a god of small things than a slave to a great brand. Hey, if you like this episode of Fabric of Life, consider subscribing to this channel. Every week we are taking you on new adventures. Next week we travel to Germany's city of Cologne to investigate when pandemic is going to end. Until then, stay tuned and curious. And don't forget, libraries still exist.